Okay, we're going to show an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to another great Archimede for you guys. And for review, big shout out to the brand. A little about them. They were founded back in 2003. And in terms of their parent company, which is Ickler brand, they were actually established back in 1924. And they're always aiming to offer high quality models at an affordable price point. And this is within their dive watch genre. Now, in terms of a dive watch, some key characteristics in design, what you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance to boost on top of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is their SportTaucher 60, which is sport diver in English, and it's Archimedes' take on a tough, no-nonsense dive watch. And some of you are probably wondering why it's taken so long for me to review this watch, and it's hard for me to say, honestly. I love Archimede. You guys know I've reviewed quite a few of them on my channel, and I own quite a few in my personal collection. But for some reason, I haven't had a chance to get hands-on with this really long-standing dive watch. And honestly, at the price point, I mean, excluding VAT or VAT, you can get this for 789 euro plus shipping, and this is on the strap configuration. Of course, it would be a little bit more expensive on the bracelet, but this thing has really been a winner and a charmer for many years. Very, very thin at only 12 millimeters, guys, with a full 300 meters of water resistance. So yeah, I'm glad to finally do what I should have done, which is get hands on with this awesome diver in the metal. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, another big shout out to Archimede for lending this piece into the channel to share with you guys. But let's go ahead and, I mean, apart from that really nice, clean German aesthetic that you would expect, guys, look at how thin this watch is. That is fantastically thin. The mid case, ultra thin, of course, nicely compartmentalized against that nice tall bezel, and a very svelte case back that just tucks in really nicely. And you can see it does have a nice curvature to it, but I mean, this is extraordinarily thin, guys. I just want to make sure that we enjoy that. Not only is it physically thin, visually it's quite thin because of the design that they've chosen. So I have to give credit where credit is due, especially during a time when so many folks have been, calling out for thinner divers. And even in this case, they're not sacrificing the depth rating. I've seen a lot of watches get thinner, but then you get 100 meters of water resistance, right? Instead, this is a full 300 meters of water resistance, which is just going to tell you that this is built to very, very robust standards. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 41 millimeters in diameter, right? So a very nice size. And, with its asymmetrical style there with the crown down here, it does have some nice crown guards. As you guys can see, crown F4 o'clock, it actually does help shrink the watch down quite a bit. Similar to how a lot of people felt like the SKX 007 or 009 would also wear quite a bit smaller than the 42 millimeters, width would make you think. Also, same here, at this 41 millimeter width, it does wear a little bit smaller, but I will say because it's so flat, it almost kind of negates that. Because of how flat it is, it does, I think, help spread the weight on the wrist really well as well. 12 millimeters in height and then 50 millimeters lug to lug, guys. And you wouldn't think it by looking at it because of the way that these lugs just downturn and slope to wrap around your wrists. So 50 millimeters is a little bit long for smaller wrists, but I will say normally that's kind of the borderline. If it's above 50 millimeters, some people will give it a second or third glance. I will say this one wears really well for one. And I mean, honestly, I was surprised by that measurement when I got it, because when I look at it, to me, this looks visually more like a 48 millimeter, 47 millimeter lug to lug, more in kind of that sweet spot. Now, and again, that's the lug to lug. The case is an Ickler stainless steel case, all brushed, very nice, sapphire. You guys can see, nice and flat with an inner AR coating. There you go. So very legible dial, and you can see there's a little bit more detail to that dial, which is really nice. Now, in terms of what's powering it behind this solid case back, which has been nicely etched, and it is a screw-in case back, you are going to have the Salida SW200, and it has 38 hours of power reserve, beats at 4 hertz, or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. But one thing I want to go back to is mention this bezel action, guys. Check this out. Woo! 120 click, unidirectional rotating. Ooh. With what to me looks like a coated steel insert, because it does have a bit of engraving to it and also a bit of a brush, circular brush to it, which is something that doesn't really get picked up in pictures, but I will say in person, you start noticing those finer details. Oh, yes. Great grip, of course, a tactile engagement, but the action itself, it's nice and tight too, and when I say tight, I don't mean it's difficult to turn, but it's like not sloppy. There's not like a lot of play to it, but just enough to where you can really actuate it and get it going, and lines up perfectly. Let's do one more, just because I'm enjoying this so much. That is a beautifully tuned bezel, because it's clicky, but it's smooth. Sometimes you can have those clicky bezels that are overly clicky, that can be very harsh, that you don't necessarily want to turn because of a lot of times the resistance on there. Going into each click, it can be a little harsh when it's too snappy. This is very smooth, but still has plenty of snap, which I can absolutely appreciate. Ooh. There we go. Let's even give it a little dust off here. All right, so getting back into these details, guys. So the dial here, matte black. It is a step dial, as you guys can see. That center section is going to have a nice little step down, and then it is raised on the second, which is nice because this is a printed dial. Another thing that adds a nice bit of dimension is that chapter ring there. It is nicely sloped, and sometimes, you know, you kind of look at it and you're not even sure, is it a chapter ring or is it the dial just coming up you know, with another angle that kind of dishes. And yeah, I think it's tough. It's, what do you think down in the comments when I look at that? All I know is that it does add a nice bit of extra dimension to an otherwise very flat, you know, colorway, right? Because the surfaces, the finishes are flat. Yeah, you can get a little bit of a satin circular brush there, but it's not glossy, it's not high polish. So I like that it all kind of comes together very cohesively. And of course, they're even getting nice pops of red, which are going to give you nice color pops. And again, something that's relatively flat in appearance. One of the nice things is that it does have a really nice lume. It's unspecified, at least to my eye, from what I could find on the specs. I'll post it on the website, but it does glow blue, so I'm assuming BGW9 here. 20 millimeter lug width, which is great. One thing that the SKX didn't have was a very versatile lug width. 20 millimeters, which is fantastic. It comes on this black rubber strap with a 2 millimeter taper down to an 18 millimeter signed pin buckle. Guys, this thing is really comfortable, but I will say that it is quite a dust magnet. You can see even after rinsing it off, it just picks up fibers because of how porous it is. So that makes it really nice in terms of wear, because of how flexible it is. It's going to be nice and sticky when you don't want it to be slippery. If you were going to use this, you know, from a tool, you know, a particularly functional use case, right? Like, that's going to be perfect for you. But for those of you that might want to be wearing this as more of an everyday piece, if you like that aesthetic and you can kind of pull it off more every day, then I will say you might want to opt, you know, either, you know, pay for the upgrade to get the bracelet, or just swap it out, right? You can still save money, get it on this strap, and then you can swap it out to a number of really great straps on the market, especially, 20 millimeters, like a nice F-cam rubber strap would look fantastic on this. But with that said, let's actually get it on wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really well. And of course, even though my wrist is on the larger side of average, I will say you guys can notice that it's also quite round. So it's not like it's super flat and wide and just ultimately accommodating to super sized watches. And you can see this is actually beautifully sized, full sized, not even close to appearing oversized, but it does have a lot of visual weight thanks to the flat, physically flat layout, and then of course the flat layout in design. But the nice thing is they do balance that out quite well with just those little slopes here, cuts, angles, and different levels to the visuals of the all of the timekeeping indexes, which I can appreciate. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get some distortion, and you're probably going to be like, whoa, that watch looks way bigger than it did a second ago. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame as such, just so you guys can still take a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio. Now check that out. Look at how flat that lays on the wrist. That angle right there is magnificent. You're going to really enjoy this one in terms of the wearing profile. They just dialed it in so well. And I mean, this thing has been around for years. I will say there's probably a couple brands that even took a couple styling cues from this watch, but it's been so low key for so long, they got away with it. And you thought that watch was a little bit more original than it really was. But check that out. Look at how flat that is. I mean, the bezel thickness versus that mid case, I mean, it's almost even, which I think was such a smart play in terms of proportions, guys, because remember, as much as ultimate dimensions are going to be what jumps out to you on a spec sheet, one thing that doesn't, it's really going to play more into your eye, and its subjectivity there is going to be the proportions. And these proportions make this watch incredibly thin, and it is quite thin physically, but the nice thing is it accentuates it, right? Because there are some watches that aren't super thick, but thanks to, let's say, a slab side, it can look way thicker than it is, or it's going to wear its weight really not great. Here, the visual weight is worn really beautifully, so I'm digging that. But with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, a light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, look at that. Just glowing, blasting as a diver should. That pip is such a great size because it just, the line weight, the proportion, again, is really great and just matches with the weight of the handset. Also with those, intermediate batons there that are going in between the 12, 3, 6, and 9. So the index here, very, very legible. Of course, you're going to have cardinal reference quickly because you can see where 12 o'clock is thanks to them using those numerals. But one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, guys. And check this out. There's just so much more to this watch when you get it out. Because you're going to get mixed lighting conditions, different conditions, and you're going to just see a lot more of the angular beauty and a lot more of that just hint of depth that you're going to be getting from things like the satin circular finish on that bezel insert, playing off of that, that multi-level dial there. Check that out with that little circular drop there in the middle, and then of course the light playing off of the slope chaptering. So very, very cool, guys. Very nice. I'm digging this one, and it's so simple. It kind of, of course, it's very Germanic, right? So very minimalist, very function forward. I mean, if you, let's say, love yourself a Zen U50, I do. I actually, until only just recently, I've had one in my collection. I did have to trade it away towards a Grail, which I will be revealing here in the next, who knows when this will post, but, in a little while. And I have to say, this definitely checks very similar boxes in terms of that brutalist design, beautiful color play, something that is instantly recognized as being quite Germanic and functional and tool-ish. And I will say this is probably a little bit more versatile than a U50. Not going to be diving quite as deep. You're not going to get the tegimented steel, but man, you're going to be getting something that now has a beautiful brushed satin finish, which is just going to go with more stuff at the end of the day, versus something that is going to be matte blasted. I mean, you know, it's just, the silvery steel hues of a satin finish. There's just something about it I just really dig. Now, in terms of closing thoughts, guys, surprisingly thin and sleek. I think that's really undersold when it comes to this model. They should be selling this thing with a side profile shot. So yeah, it feels really sporty though. Even, you know, especially with these numerals, it really reminds me as a car enthusiast. This is like a sporty Audi sedan, like an RS model, right? It has a fine balance of both form and function. That's why I said sedan, right? Form and function. It's not just a dedicated sports car, a hypercar. This is something you can use every day. You can enjoy, right? And I think that's really sedans, wagons, or shooting brakes, depending on what part of the country you're from, or let's say what part of the world you're from. You know, you might have a different name for it, but yeah, this is definitely giving me a lot of great, even hot hatch vibes, right? So think GTI, right? It also gives me those vibes, or, you know, an Audi, like an RS3 or something. So really, really cool. If in terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability, as they've come out with a slew of different ones. You can get different timing bezel inserts in terms of the turning bezel, so you can get like a 12-hour travelers. You can even get one that has a compass, so you can use this for more as an outdoors piece and less as a dedicated diver. So yeah, a lot of options there. You could travel, and that's the cool thing, is that you can kind of choose which one might suit you best. And then of course there's different color variations as well. Now, in terms of comparable models, again, if you really want a true German diver with a German produced case, you'd be hard pressed to find something else at this price point. Honestly, most other German brands will either have Asian sourced cases in this price range, or charge a lot more for something like submarine steel, right? Or one that has any level of surface hardening to it. So yeah, other German sourced options are going to be, you know, a lot more expensive. And this is a truly German watch, and that has a fine German construction, which I can appreciate. And yeah, no, it doesn't have a German movement, but a lot of watches, great German watches, don't necessarily have German movements. I mean, think about Zinn, for example. So yeah, Archimedes definitely up there in terms of, I think, within the micro brand space, they have a lot of street cred for them doing a lot of great things. And, you know, when you think of Zinn, Damasco, Archimedes, I think it should definitely be within that same conversation. So guys, bottom line, you know, I'm not really sure how this diver has kept such a low profile over the years. It's thin with a full 300 meters of water resistance. It has its own unique design character, and it packs a Swiss movement with a smooth 4 hertz sweep for well under $1,000. While many of its contemporaries from 10 years ago may look dated now, this German gem continues to age like a fine wine. Like, I think this still looks great, and if you could tell me that this was a new release, I'd probably believe it. It doesn't, again, it's aged really well, and a lot of that has to do with that simplicity in design. So with that said, let me know what you guys all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.